And let's get going. So first, I wanted to ask each of you, what is an independent publisher? And in that respect, what your particular independent publisher does and works with. So Shawn, why don't we go ahead with you first?
Oh, I was gonna, I didn't know it was gonna be first. So hello, independent publisher. What my definition of it is, it's something, an entity that's apart, sort of away from the big four and a half, five, whatever it is called now, of the large traditional publishers in New York City, traditionally. Um, we do many of the same things as those guys, but we're just a smaller house. We have smaller staff. We do traditional things like we pay advances, we pay royalties. Our books are orderable through Ingram, like through large distributors. So it sort of mirrors what the larger presses do, but we just have a lot more. I feel like I was in Atlanta 2 weekends ago, and I talked about this on a panel with people from Random House all the way down to sort of us. And I said, well, we don't have a giant office to pay for in the city, so we can be a little more fleet on a foot. We can take chances on things possibly that maybe bigger houses won't, because it doesn't have to get through 15 people in a committee to be published. So there are differences internally. To me, that is what the main difference is. And there was a second part of the question. I was not prepared. Level best is, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, no, I think you answered it. And then what specifically your house does.
That's basically what we do.
Yeah. And Jennifer, how about you?
Well, I think Shawn's done a great job already describing what an independent press is. I think many independent presses are also small publishers, and we're a small publisher. And so we have sort of done more niche marketing. So we do a lot of mysteries. We also publish books a lot about Alaska, because that is the publisher is the Epicenter, and the Camel and Coffeetown are the imprints from Epicenter Press. And that the Epicenter Press was founded in Alaska. We do similar things. We are with various wholesalers. We also have a sales rep team that goes out and sells the books to bookstores and other venues. We have subrights agents, so we do turn our books over to subrights agents for film, audio, and foreign rights, etc., depending on the contracts with the author. And so I think that's what we try to do, and we try to accommodate. I think the other thing is that we have a hands-on experience for authors. They have some control or some input about covers. We hope that they approve of the covers. We try to have a joint collaboration on covers, on interiors, on editing. And I think in national houses, you're much more driven by a sales force and marketing team that decides a cover. And the author often has to live with it. We try to work with authors on those experiences and hope that it's a sort of a partnership with them. I think more than the traditional houses, having worked in traditional houses and been through those meetings that Shawn said, where there's a group of people that makes these decisions, we're more hands-on in making the decisions about what gets published and how it's published.
And how about you, Faye? Oh,
yeah, I mean, I think I agree on all fronts. I definitely view independent publishing as anything not associated with the big five. Independent publishers can range in size. They can be very large or very small. We're more on the small side, but we are a traditional publisher. Some independent publishers are hybrid publishers, but that's a different business model. So I think from the sound of it, all of our publishers kind of do business in a similar way. We give an author an advance and then they earn royalties on the book. But yeah, it is a very hands-on process, I think, through our for our house. Yeah.
So yeah, to talk a little bit more about that, because I think it is of significant interest, to an audience of writers. Jennifer mentioned, having more say in your cover and more an easier contact. I'm guessing that you all are much easier to reach if an author needs something than, you know, if they're published by Random House. Can you each speak a little bit to that and how that benefits both your business and the authors?
Yeah,
Chris,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
I guess I can keep going. So yeah, my company, Oceanview, we were already quite small, and then at the beginning of this year, our owners decided to retire. And so we're now under new ownership, although our owner has been there for 10 years. So our company is only him and I, along with a bunch of independent contractors that we work with and our distributor, of course. So it's a very large team still, but Oceanview at its core is just the two of us. So it is very easy to get in touch with us. And it also is wonderful in a lot of ways because I think, you know, when you try to contact a traditional large publisher, you don't always know who you're supposed to be talking to about certain things. But between the two of us, we kind of always know what is going on with your book. So that is a really nice aspect of it. And everything is very collaborative from start to finish. So, you know, from even the marketing aspect of it, we allow authors to have input on how they want their book to be marketed and things that they would like us to do in particular, things that they want to do on their own. They are also involved in even writing some of the cover copy if they want to be. They're involved in the cover design process. So we just try to keep them in the loop throughout the entire process and make sure that they are extremely happy with the final result of the book. And they feel like it's something that they can really, you know, feel proud of promoting to their friends, family, and larger audiences, of course.
Okay. And Jennifer, I know you are the one who touched on this. Can you talk just a little bit more about those advantages as versus, say, your big five, or alternatively, going the direction of self-publishing? You know, what an independent publisher brings to the table.
Okay, so there's the traditional houses, I think, have clout behind them. And they have big distribution networks and they have sales staff that's very devoted to what they're selling. And there is that part of that. They're easier, I think, for selling into the big chain accounts or to various national distributors. They have the clout because of who they are. If you're published with Random House, you can get in the door easier. Meaning that you can get in to visit with people who have the ability to order a lot of books. In terms of a small press, I think that what we try to offer is what Faith has talked about, is some hands-on work, working with people. We try to be answer, you know, mail, email, phone calls as soon as we can. It does take time to get answers. And so sometimes I call it the hurry up and wait business. We hurry and then we have to wait to get things answered and figure out how it works in the systems that we have. We do not have a distributor, which is Faith has. We have wholesalers who we work with, and then we have sales reps that we work with. And if you're a self-publisher, you have to pay for all this. We essentially pay for design, cover design, distribution. We get in through the distribution channels that we have. And if you're a self-publisher, you're in charge of doing all that yourself, or hiring someone to help you do it. So that's the big difference. It's the responsibility of how the book gets into the reader's hands. How does that work? If you're with a publisher, they try to get it into stores. They try to take care of things. They design, they edit, they market, whatever they choose to do. If you're a self-publisher, you do all that yourself, or you hire someone to help you do it.
Shawn, your
And it's my turn. Yes, we're very accessible too. There's two main partners at Level Best, but we do have a staff of people that support. We have a really wonderful admin / marketing person that she answers a lot of my emails now, which I love. I love, love, love that. Because would wake up on Monday morning and always have 100 emails, and now I get like maybe 35 because she gets a lot more, which is great. We have an in-house agent that sells subrights, which is great. And other people that do reading, special file things, and with bookkeeper. So we have a support staff, which is nice. On the cover that you guys were talking about before, we do like to also collaborate with the authors on their covers because I have a sales and marketing background, and I always felt like if I really liked, I used to sell wine. If I really liked that wine, I was sold a lot more of it, you know. So as we want them to sort of, while we still hold the the final say, I guess you would say, in the contract, we do want their input and see what they like and try to get it as close as we can to what they will be proud of. And like as Faith said, you want to be proud of it and love the book. We do a lot of different phases of editing, so we are very hands-on. So when the new people kind of we have a we call our authors besties because they're local best books. So we have an all besties meeting like 4 or 5 times a year, and people come in and they don't really quite know who I am yet. And I'm like, oh, you're gonna get to know me really well. We're gonna be working very close for a while, for years. But that's how we do it. And I do have a lot of friends, as I'm sure there's people in this room who are with larger publishers. And there was one story where my friend said, "Do you like this cover?" And he texted it to me. I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to say I like it, but I said, "Oh, that's good," you know. And he goes, they sent it to me. They're like, "Do you like this?" And he said, "Well, no, I have notes." And they're like, "Well, we weren't really asking you. This is just your cover." So they just were trying to say something to make him feel like he had some say. But there's that. So that's not to say that happens to everybody. It just happens. But yeah, there's similarities and there's differences to be with a large press and a small press, and vastly different to be self-published, in my opinion.
And so for folks who might just be starting their writing journey, would you guys mind going over just kind of your process once a manuscript is submitted to you? Faith said there's no editorial committee. It's the two of you, and you make the decision on which manuscripts you're going to buy, right? So kind of talk a little bit about that process, and then what the next step is, and kind of then how it rolls through once you decide to buy a manuscript. So whoever wants to.
Okay, I'll go.
Oh,
I'll go.
okay.
So we take unsolicited manuscripts and agented manuscripts, and then we have readers that work with us. And if we have books that come in from Alaska, we have a Alaska reader, which is important. We have someone who works with us from Alaska. And we have a submission meeting, and we go over what books have been submitted, and then we contract. We do not buy them. We contract them because the author always owns the content. We contract for a period of time or whatever our contracts are up. One little note is to make sure if you are getting published, to make sure you figure out who is going to own it if something happens to you. We've had some authors who have died unexpectedly last year, and trying to find out who owns the books has been interesting to where to send the royalty checks. So just some information for your group as an author, that's a part of the role. Once we talk about what we think is what we can do with a book. Is this something that fits our list? And we discuss all this in-house to try to figure out what works for us. If you've been published with us, usually we work with them as well to figure out if there's a new book or a new contract to be done. Then we do send a contract to the author, and they're welcome to come back with us and talk with us about issues of the contract or what they understand. And I often recommend that they talk with a lawyer or send their contract to the Authors Guild. And then once that happens and gets signed, then we send them a welcome package, which explains how we do business when we edit, etc. It takes us at least a year once your book has been contracted to get a book published, because we already have a list of books that we have coming out. For instance, in 2024, we're finished for the year and we're into 2025 and looking at what else, where we are with our list of books that we have coming in. And then we edit and copy edit and proof and send it off to book designers because we consult with 2 different kinds of book designers. And then it comes back, you see the proof, you see the cover, we talk about that. We send what we call a book fact sheet because we ask you to fill out some information about your book. What are your keywords? What do we think your keywords are? And that becomes also a sales sheet that later we hand to the author so they can use that on their website or go out and sell the book if they'd like to, or if they're going to an event or something like that. And then we decide the marketing strategy for that book as we go through the process. So that's kind of it. And then that all the other part is the book is uploaded into a special, we have a program with Ingram that we worked with them on for our size of press. It's called Ingram Ignite. And we use that as our place to upload books. And they then therefore distribute it out to various places. We also work with Baker and Taylor. There's other places that we work with. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds similar to what we do. So our kind of lead time is about 12 to 18 months, just depending on what we already have lined up. So if we don't have many things lined up yet, it'll be closer to 12. If we have a lot, it'll be closer to 18. We take both agented and unagented manuscripts. I would say that we, give preference to the agented manuscripts because they do have someone that we trust behind them who is, promoting them and saying, I've bought into this book, so you should too. But, we do have slow periods during submissions. So if we ever have a slow period, we definitely look over those unagented manuscripts as well. And we have had some fantastic books come from those. So we do definitely give credence to them. But once we get a contract signed for a book, it then will go into the marketing and editorial process pretty much immediately. And I handle both of those things. So, we only publish about 10 books a year, sometimes less, sometimes more. So that enables me to wear multiple hats as well as Lee, my other half at the company. So kind of simultaneously, I'll be reading the book for its first editorial read and then creating what we call our marketing package. So that'll include a lot of the flap copy and any sort of metadata points that we want to add for online retailers, any sort of sales information that we want to pass on to our distributors so they can sell the book better, and just sort of strategizing about how we want to advertise in general. And then I'll also be editing at the same time. I saw someone in the chat say they want to hear more about the timeline for the editorial process. I think that varies from company to company. For us, it takes probably about 6 to 8 months to edit the book. It just depends on, if we sign your contract really early, then we have more time to edit it. If we're trying to squeeze it in, we'll shorten that time window. But we give the same amount of attention to each book. And I read through the books a couple of times, and then the author, I think, gets to read through it 3 times during the editorial process, and they can approve edits, they can decline edits. Usually if they decline them, we kind of talk about it a little bit, and I try to convince them to accept it, but it's a collaboration. And then it also goes to a professional proofreader who is sort of the last person to have eyes on the book. And then that is finalized. So then it goes to a typesetter. Throughout this process, we also have an advanced reader copy of the book made. And so then that is sent out to reviewers or bookstores or libraries, just trying to kind of get the word out about the book. And so maybe those reviewers will review it, or those bookstores will order it in, or libraries will order it in. And we also send the book to our distributor, obviously. So they have that information probably about 6 months prior to when the book launches. And then they can start those sales meetings because our distributor, IPG, they work with all of those retailers one-on-one. So we don't really have to have those direct interactions with the retailers, which is nice for us. But we can interact with them through IPG if needed. I think that kind of covers our process. We definitely continue to pitch the book for review or try to publicize it as much as we can as we get closer to that launch period. And even afterwards, we'll try to keep that buzz going for as long as we possibly can. But yeah, that's kind of our process.
Sounds similar to ours. We're all doing similar things, which is just, a little different, but it's basically the same process. We publish more than 10 books, that's for sure. We're doing a lot of reprints too. We picked up series from people that were with other presses that are no longer around or whatever the case may be. And then we're renewing series, like taking it forward after reprinting. Excuse me. We have 3 stages of editing: developmental edit, a line edit, and then a proof copy. We have a production editor that works in-house to create the files. So a little bit different scenario with us. We get a lot of I would say anywhere from 10 to 20 manuscript submissions a week through our portal on our website. And then we have a lot of agents pitching us. I would say 30, 40 agents that I work with all the time that just send me stuff all the time. So, and I think as Faith was saying, it's not that, you kind of do pay attention to those agents because they brought you really good stuff before. So I don't like to say that the books are better, but it's just sort of like, okay, this is a vetted manuscript. Someone believes in this. And a lot of the edits, agents I work with do a round of edits too. So, it's sort of have someone else's has done it. So that part is, it's gonna be a little more polished sometimes. But yeah, we found some great stuff in the portal too. But yeah, that's kind of, I'm just reiterating everything everyone else says, but we do produce ARCs as well and so every author gets 5 physical ARCs of their own, and then we send ARCs out to the reviewers. They get a sell sheet when they get their ARCs that, just all the information about the book, distribution, the fact that we offer returns, which isn't always a thing with smaller presses, but I am an author myself, and I just don't want anyone to walk into a bookstore and say, I'd love to have a sign and get all the way to the end of closing the deal, and then like, we can't return them, so we're not going to do it. So we always do make sure that's clear on everyone's sell sheet. They'll have their cover by then, so that part is good. But basically, we're all doing similar stuff.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we do send our stuff out to the subrights agent. We'll send often the manuscript out at times, depending on what it is. And the editorial process for us depends on what the manuscript is and how much editing has to happen and how much back and forth has to happen. And we don't have a set 3 or whatever. We try to get the book out to be best it can be. So sometimes it's 1 edit through, sometimes it's 4 edits. It just depends. So it's that's the difference, is we aren't under a guideline like I think sometimes more traditional houses would be a little more difficult on the editing and who gets a choice. So we do have that. We publish a lot of books. We publish over about 40 to 45 books a year. And part of that is we have an Alaska press, and we have a different schedule for the Alaska press because of the cruise ships and the gift shops. And if anybody's taken a cruise to Alaska, when you go. And so we have to get our books out at a certain time to hit the Alaska cruise ships and the gift stores and everything else, because Alaska certainly sort of closes down during the winter, just due to the nature of winters up there. So we are under that. So it's kind of an interesting experience to work in that marketplace as well, because we are driven by weather there. So that's kind of interesting.
Had not occurred to me, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So, Shawn, I'm curious, how many books typically a year does Level Best publish?
Well, depends on the year you're in, but this year it's about 3 times as many as Jennifer, so it's like 150 we're in. We started out, and like I said, some of those are reprints, so reviving, and I'm picking up other series. Some of them are, and we have an anthology imprint, so we do some anthologies too. We have a nonfiction imprint. Now I saw one of our nonfiction besties is here. So we have multiple imprints, so that it kind of bulked up our title. When we first bought Level Best, it did 1 book a year. It did the best New England crime stories, and they were gonna, it was gonna go away. I saw it on Facebook, and I messaged. I knew everybody that was involved before, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" Because it's I'm a short story writer, and I thought that's such a shame to see a paying market go away. Plus, it's MWA approved. It'd already been through all those hoops. It was established, award winning. So I reached out and I said, hey, what's going on? They're like, we just can't, have time to do it anymore. I said, well, you let me do it? I would love to. I don't want, just for the fact of to keep it going. And they said, well, we had other people ask and we said no, but we wouldn't say no to you. So please come and take it first. I said, okay. So I did the one book and then like the first year we did like 3 books. And then the next year we did like maybe 6. And then we did 12. And then we did 40. And then now we're doing bananas. Of course.
Yeah, and we also buy some reprint books, depending on what it is. So we did buy Sue Henry, who was, her stories were set in Alaska. So we worked with the agent to do that. So we have done some reprints, but it depends on how long they've been gone, out of print and from where. So some places, because of given that in the 90s, ebooks weren't around, we bought books that were never ebooks. They were just print. So that's been interesting to do.
Yeah,
We do
it's
print
just
books.
I'm sorry, Jennifer. I was just going to say we just started a new imprint called Level Brit, and we're reviving British series from like the 80s. And
Yeah.
a couple of them are like, I don't have this electronically.
Yeah,
Sending us a book, and we're
yeah.
like, wow, that is old school. That is old school.
Yes.
So we have to like transpose it into something we can actually use with modern publishing. So, but yeah,
So
that sounds cool.
Yeah, we have Hazel Holt, who was published years ago, and we have her first 6 books, and so those are in print and in ebooks, and
That's so
consistently
cool.
sell because of that.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. Books are getting second lives. That's
Mhm.
always a great thing. So tell me a little bit about, because it certainly is not everyone accepts unagented manuscripts. And so for publishers that do that, folks are really looking for you. For a publishing house that's willing to take a look at an unagented. Now, was that like for Shawn, you kind of grew it as you went. Was it always that you took unagented submissions? Or is that a newer development in your timeline at Level Best?
We started out with most of the first people we signed didn't have an agent, but we just happened to know them from the community, and they were looking for a publisher, and we thought, oh, and we didn't make the choice to even do novels for the first like 2 years. It was like we're into our 2nd year. We're like, well, maybe we should start doing novels. And I said to my partners at the time, I had more partners now, I just have one. I said, well, now this is a whole new animal. Like now you're getting into bed with people for 5 years at least. So this is like different than an anthology. So let's just talk about it. Because it's an exciting time for people. It's an emotional time for people. Just getting into way more of a relationship at that point. But yeah, most of the beginning people didn't have agents. And then we started getting noticed. And then the agents just came to us. And then we had a couple that just started bringing us a whole bunch of people. And that's how that evolved.
Okay. Faith, what about you guys?
Oceanview has always been open to unagented manuscripts. That's also kind of how they got started. We're based in Florida, and particularly the Sarasota area. And so a lot of our early books from almost 20 years ago are local authors. They often have a very strong local focus. And those are really fun books. I still love them. So we've just had success with unagented books in the past, and it would feel like kind of a shame to completely close ourselves off to what could be a really fantastic story that just doesn't happen to have representation. So we just want to be open to that, and we also happen to have the bandwidth currently to be open to those. If we were getting absolutely flooded constantly by agented submissions, then maybe we would have to change our rules a little bit, but it's been fine for us so far, and it's been good in a lot of cases.
I helped launch the romance genre for Walden Books. So I have an experience of being around the agents and editors, and also when I worked in traditional publishing, I was often reading unagented scripts and trying to pick someone who could help a house out with new ways to a new author. I have a good track record with that. And some of those authors are now on the New York Times bestselling list all of the time. So I always have liked unagented manuscripts just to see what's out there. And of course, I have some romance authors who publish with us who are unagented. And so they know me, I know them, I know their work. So that has worked. It depends. I often think it's for some authors to just find an agent and to have that experience of how to do that is difficult. And so I kind of like unagented, but I also like agented manuscripts. If I know agents who know me and they send me something, I of course will make sure that we read it and assess if this works for us. But we're a small press, and I realize that sometimes we get very quirky material, which is really also very interesting because of it, because the traditional houses may not pick that up.
Yes, that is definitely, I think, strength, that you are able to bring to the market something that maybe otherwise wouldn't get the chance to be put out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I'm a former bookseller.
Mhm.
So I worked in the Denver market and I also worked in the Seattle market, but I also helped work in it for a national chain and went to a lot of different bookstores across the country. And I was helping to be in charge of over 750 stores. So I would look at what was going on. And at that time in the 80s, self-publishing works in the 90s were sort of very interesting. It was different than now. And so in the Northwest has a huge reputation for self-publishing work that went on to do very well. You know, Mutant Message down under. There's the science fiction guy who's out of Montana, who did very well self-published. So there's just a whole history of this up here of fiction, nonfiction books that worked. And so those are unagented until they're agented. And I think of someone like Colleen Hoover, for instance, unagented, and then also only gets an agent, and now she's doing very well. She did well before, but I just think there's always that possibility of going through that. I can, from a book selling side, and people would come in as a self-published author or whatever, small press, and you would be interested in that. And I hope booksellers continue to do that.
So actually, that is the perfect transition into another thing I was curious about was what if there are any trends that you have seen, either as far as a particular subgenre or just levels of quirky individualism, or just kind of like what you have seen lately cross your desk as far as submissions go, and then what also then on the other end, what you've seen that is maybe selling particularly well.
I just spent, as I said earlier, I was in Atlanta for the weekend for the Atlanta Writers Conference, and I was pitched. I mean, they had just wall-to-wall booked the pitches basically the whole time I was there. And then a couple months before that, I was at the Maryland Writers Association for like a similar event. So I've been listening to a lot of people come in and talk to me about their work. And that's one thing, and this question comes up a lot. The one thing I noticed, these two events that I've just done, there's a lot more, which I love, a lot more emphasis on non-traditional voices, stories about gender fluid characters, solving crimes, this and that. So I think it's the larger conversation and the culture is coming through people's work, and I just find that really fascinating. And I think especially with smaller independent presses like us, we can highlight those voices without, like I said, getting it through 15 other people that maybe have different views on things or whatever it is. But I think that I feel like things that are happening in larger culture are being condensed into mystery novels, and in my case, are crime novels. And I also, a lot of people have wrote a lot over the pandemic. A lot of people trying to get through their trauma from the pandemic. You know, I'm seeing a lot of like, I wrote this during there, and then it'll be like pandemic-y kind of situations in the books. But that's what I've seen. What do you guys think?
Um, that's really good. Because we have the Alaska part of it, we have a number of indigenous writers come through us. One of our bestsellers was Two Old Women by Velma Wallace, won a number of awards. It's been around for over 20 years. So we have that happening. We have one called Silavig right now, which is doing very well. So I'm seeing indigenous, I'm seeing submissions from around the world, which I did not see before. And I mean, around the world, mean Africa, India, Japan, not so much with China, and not so much with South America, but and Australia, New Zealand. And that's one thing, we are publishing some books from Australia. So I'm seeing a variety of settings and stories. One of the things that comes and goes is paranormal. And when I was watching the romance book business, that would come and go as well. What's interesting to me in mystery and all genre fiction is genre fiction borrows from all other genres. There's mystery fantasy, there's mystery romance, romantic suspense, historical. I would say the one thing that's interesting to me is historical mysteries seem to be around, and we're getting some of those. I'm also seeing the fact that people are coming out of COVID and their experience with COVID, which drove me to read books from 100 years ago that did well, because I was curious to see what people wrote after the flu epidemic, and because nobody really knows how many people died during that, but also what the country went through, and World War I. So I decided to read all the bestsellers during that time, couple of years. I had read them, luckily, when I was a teenager, some of them, but just to know how writers were dealing with the crisis they'd come through. And that's one of the things that I wanted to say to every writer who's writing. I really honor that you're trying to work in this time and write the stories from your heart during this time that we're going through in this country and the world, because it's through you that people get empathy. And as a former bookseller, the stories that I would hear from readers whose lives changed when they read a book that seemed to understand the situation they were in and what they chose to do about it was always so heartwarming, and it was just wonderful. So there's that part that's going on for us. So I do not believe in talking about trends. Why? Because the minute you discuss a trend and everybody decides to write it, it doesn't become a trend anymore. The only time I see trends could work is if you're a self-published author and you have a book that's ready to go and a trend's hot and you can write your keywords that go to the trend. That might work for you. That's how I feel about it. So.
Yeah, I think we've sort of experienced the same things, especially with trends. You know, we've talked about our lead times being anywhere from a year to 18 months out. So what's trending now is probably not going to be trending by the time your book comes out. So we just really focus on finding good stories that we think resonate with us and will resonate with a lot of people. What we've seen a lot of COVID books. We've also seen a lot of strong female protagonist mysteries, whether it's like a police procedural or an amateur sleuth, which is great. Those books have been doing well for us, so we're happy to see those. We're definitely in search of more of those diverse voice books, whether, you know, the author is from a unique background or whether they feature a storyline that, you know, uplifts some maybe previously silenced voices. I think those are really important to get out there. And I think there's a strong demand for those currently as well. So definitely encourage anyone out there who is writing a unique book to continue on, because people want to hear it. So yeah.
Agree. That's good.
Oh, well, I cannot think of a better note to pause it on, because we're definitely not done, because I know the questions have been coming in the chat. And so if Rick is there, He's our question guy, and so we're gonna.
I'm here.
All right. So fire away, Rick.
Well, yeah, several of these questions I think have been answered already, not necessarily in sequence, but I'll go with, can you explain house agent?
For us, we have an agent that works. So when the books are published, she gets the information about the book and she starts pitching it out to audio publishers, TV, those kind of things, subrights, so foreign film audio. Yeah, she does it automatically for each of the new titles that comes out. That's how we do it.
Okay.
You already mentioned how many books you publish a year. This question is, I've heard that the big five do less and less to get books in the hands of readers. One of the reasons so much focus is on taking big name authors. Do you agree with that?
We were just talking about that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just going to jump in. We were just talking about that in Atlanta because I was hanging out with the Random House and the Soho Crime people, and they're larger houses. And there is that sentiment. There is that sentiment in the room. Some of the authors were, like frustrated because it seems like I don't work there, but it does kind of seem like big name authors get a lot of the support for marketing. And then the Random House, my colleagues said, and a brand new hot release person that they think might do great. So those are kind of like the people in between sort of get not a lot of, they still have a publicist and that kind of stuff, but they put the real advertising money sort of behind the two ends of the dumbbell. If that's a bad analogy, but you know what I mean. So what is that your experience, you guys?
Yep, pretty much exactly.
So one of the things I think of is a couple of things. If you're a big name author, say Colleen Hoover, let's just use that as an example. She's probably been paid a very big advance. The publisher is writing on her to earn it back or to get as many books sold as possible. I remember being up at Barnes & Noble into the buyer when John Grisham came out, and I was talking to the mystery buyer, and he told me how much they had sold and how the publisher was dealing with it. And I've talked with publishers, and they have to go to the bank and get a loan at times to be able to print at that time 2 or 3 million copies of a hardcover. So you're hoping that, so the money comes back, they're pushing it out the door. They're giving the ad space to it. They're that. I also know authors who have bought a New York Times ad so that their book can be talked about. So it depends on that. So I think the big houses put the money sometimes behind the big names because of the investment. It's an investment into a book or the author. They also will sometimes put it behind a debut author, so they will send out a lot of galleys. And as we all know, those end up on Amazon for sale. So there's that issue. And then the mid list has always been an issue. How do you, as an author, get out of the mid list? I mean, I've been in tons of meetings about that. How do you get out of a mid list? I've talked with authors about it and publishers about it. How do you get someone to the next level? And what is the next level these days? So it's an ongoing issue of how do you bring attention to the books that you have. And I think what's happening, and I see what's happening, is that people are paying attention to the backlist. And why is that? Because you've already bought the book. You've already done the work on it. You've already got the cover. It's just reminding people to buy it and to start with if it's an author that's got a new book, make sure that they have the first book out to make sure that that is available. And that's more easy now because of ebooks and print on demand. So that you can help an author's career if you have 10 books in the series and want to get the first book out again. It's available. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay.
Yep.
Question about marketing budget. Do you have a strict or guidelines for how much you expend for marketing on each book?
No.
Is there a range?
No, I'm not going to discuss that. That's proprietary information in-house.
Okay. I think you already covered about the timeline editorial process. Someone asked, what's included in the contract?
As far as
What?
marketing?
Yes, that's the general question. Yeah.
I can't discuss that either because that's proprietary knowledge to the house. And that's what you negotiate when you, if we're interested in contracting with an author, then we have a contract and we send it and we negotiate through what it is and try to explain it to the author what it is if they're a first-time author. And if it's an agent pretty well knows contracts, which is what's interesting about having an agent. And they also often have an attorney on staff that they can go have someone take a look at the contract. And so all those are kind of, that information about a contract is pretty much proprietary knowledge to the house. And it always has been. The Author Guild often has information about what a general contract is. That's good to go do. It's also good to go to a writer's conference. If there's a lawyer there, talk about what they know about contracts. Can they explain sort of the terms of contracts? There's a good contract lawyer in LA, Jonathan. I don't have to get his name, but he's very, very good. He knows, he's worked with a lot of publishing houses. So that's my thoughts on that. You guys, what do you guys feel?
Yeah, if there's
Without
other
getting-
resources. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Faith.
Oh, I was just gonna say, without getting into specifics, the contract just covers terms of ownership of the book, who owns these subrights and everything that entails, and then the terms of payment to the author and the agent. So that's basically all it entails.
Yeah, it's Jonathan Kirsch. And what I think the big contract does for us is to establish that you own the book. You own, it's your content.
Yeah, and there's lots of resources, as Jennifer was saying. You can, like, I think MWA also has like a standard terms in a contract. There's lots of the Writers Guild places
Yep.
that you can see what should be in there. And if you are not used to reading contracts, definitely have an agent or an attorney read it for you. And also read your contract. We have to put that in like the author newsletter sometimes. Like, hey guys, read your contract.
Yes,
You ask questions, like it's in there. Just make sure
Yeah.
you read it.
And one thing I would say is make sure you go to someone who knows about publishing rights, copyright, trademark, not a family lawyer. Because we've had family lawyers go through contract and they mark the whole thing up because they have no idea what that means, what the contract
Yeah.
means for books. It's a very quirky business.
100%. That happens to us too. He says red lights coming. Oh no.
Yeah.
And to Jennifer's point, you really shouldn't be discussing what's in your contract with other people, that maybe you're co-pubbing with or whatever, or it is confidential. It says on every page. It says confidential information with you.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to say is we are, all of us here, and I mean all of us, we are working in one of the oldest businesses in the world, writing. It goes through changes and all through the history of publishing, writing, whatever, storytelling. And so just realize that it's an antiquated business. In a way, we are not fast moving compared if you've been in other businesses. We do not move quickly, I don't think, right, you guys? Publishing has the way of going through things. And I always when I was first in it, I was like, really? So it's just know that. So we are the hurry up and wait business.
I had a question on print runs, the number of books that you do. How many print runs for each of your books? Is there any set amount?
No, and that's again confidential to the author and the agent and the publishing house. And I know that from being around it because when I left publishing or when I left the chains, everybody wanted to know the information that I knew about the print runs. It's confidential. No one discusses it. So again, it just isn't, we just don't talk about that because it's per book. It's not a general thing. The only people that I know have some ideas about what a print run may be would be category romance. And why is that? Because a lot of it is subscription. It's a little black box of books that are sent to you, and they know how many readers they have signed up for that. And so they can guess a print run, and the author is usually knows that. Okay.
Yep. Let's see. Well, can you speak to what genres you prefer to publish and any new trends in genres you're seeing? I think you discussed a little bit about the new trends, but mostly mysteries and crime. Is that?
Well, I'll just go. We publish romance, mystery, and suspense. We also publish some nonfiction books, and we publish memoir. And we also publish books about history and humor and biography, etc., in the Northwest and Alaska. So we have a kind of a broad base on that. We do not publish science fiction fantasy. We did publish that years ago, but that is a hard business for us because we don't publish enough of it to get a good reputation for that. We do not publish children's titles either. And some publishers do. We do not do that. We have published some poetry, and those were authors. Epicenter bought Coffeetown-Camel in 2017, and we had some poetry authors from our time at Coffeetown. And if those authors, if they have a new book of poetry, we consider that. So part of it is that for us. Shawn, what about you?
We do books for kids. We do a middle grade to YAs. We have an imprint for younger readers, which I really love that because I was a young reader and I have a young reader. We're a crime fiction press. That's how we started. That's where our focus. But we have books where the cat is solving the crime all the way up to everyone's getting their heads chopped off. We have the whole range, so cozy all the way up to thriller, some procedurals, that kind of thing. We have a cookbook or two coming out, so that's fun. True crime, as I said, and anthology print. We have a historical fiction, historical mystery imprint, which is actually doing really well for us. Yeah, so we're sort of within crime. We're kind of like all over the place in crime. Not too much else outside of crime, unless it's food, and I'll look at it.
We do all mystery, thriller, and suspense. That's the only genre we do. And part of our success has been because we have just stuck to that genre specifically. So we've been able to build our reputation within that genre. We used to be more narrow in terms of subgenre on what we would accept, but recently we've been much more open to just anything that interests us. So a lot of different books can be considered a thriller, really. It's sort of a very broad definition. So yeah, any sort of mystery, thriller, suspense book is what we're open to.
Do you reply to all submissions?
I try to I do try to handle the submissions, and so I see what comes through, and we do try to reply to all submissions at some level, a rejection or we're interested more. And sometimes stuff slips through, but we did try. We got a tremendous amount of submissions during COVID, so I'm sure that some of that did not get answered as quickly as we wished or whatever. And we did write a letter to many people saying, we're sorry, we're late with getting back to you.
Yeah, we make every effort to respond to every submission, but things happen sometimes, but we try.
Yeah, same. I have faith it's answered for me. So we do our best.
And the next question here was about the backlist. I think you've talked about the backlist books. Anything to elaborate on that?
Sometimes there's programs that we try to do about backlist books through Ingram, and we do try to bring those back. And again, if it's connected to a series, then we try to bring that attention to that. But when we go to regional book shows, and we do try to bring information about our backlist, and we do sales conference with our book reps, and we do try to bring information about the backlist that might be some book that we think has gotten attention. And if we do find a book that all of a sudden gets attention, the author somehow has gotten attention for a book, we try to alert people.
Yeah, we're about the same. For most of our very old books, we have them enrolled in backlist marketing programs. But some of those books still are our top selling ebooks today. So, our backlist is quite strong. And then if it's connected to a series, it's much easier to market along with the next book that's coming out in the series, if it's a continuing series. Otherwise, I would say, the book has quite a few years where we do actively market it before it goes kind of into our backlist marketing program.
I like being third. I can say, yep, I agree. Sort of how we do. Too. Sort of how we do. Whenever the new book's coming out, we always remind in the newsletter about the previous books in the series. And we're not super old as far as like novels yet, so it's not like books are 10 or 15 years old. It's like they came out, within the last 5-6 years, so they're not super old. None of our books are really that old yet. Old, not old, from the past.
I think this is a two-part question. I'll ask it as that. First, do you pay advances? And secondly, do agented authors get higher advances than unagented ones?
I know what
We
Jennifer's
do.
going to say.
Oh, I'll just jump in super quick. We do pay advances. I would not say that our advances depend on whether they're represented or not.
We don't always pay advances, and it does not matter about an agent or not for us. Depends upon the work.
And the specifics would be, private, obviously, but we do pay advance. We, they're not huge, but we do try to give everybody something. We like to be able to announce in Publishers Marketplace too, so that, heart space.
What about self-published authors who sell through KDP, Amazon?
I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I would ask if someone has done that, would you take that person on and take on that book too, or just any other books that they did after that?
We have done that in the past where we've continued a series that someone initially started by self-publishing. And honestly, it has not been successful for us. So it's not something that we plan on continuing to do. But that's not to say that other publishers, they might have a different experience than we did. That's just kind of been our situation.
We have taken some books on that have authors sold through KDP, as long as they pull the book out of print, but realize that the book will always still show up on Amazon, because that's how Amazon does business. So we have paid attention to that, but again, it depends on how long they've been out of print. So if it's like 10 years, then if we can relaunch a series, then we'll think about it. But again, it depends on the content and if they have pulled it out of print.
Yeah, I've been approached a couple times, and it's, and people will say, well, I sold 2,000 ebooks. And I'm like, well, are you going to sell 5,000 more? Because we're putting the work into it. That's to me like a sell through. Like that's, but if that's if you only did one, and you're going to continue the series and you have those kind of sales, that would be interesting, But I don't think just repackaging a book and putting it out under our house, like for what purpose? You've already kind of sold through that book, and just enjoy having all the money at that point, yourself.
Let's see here. Could you define and describe the mid-list a bit more?
Well, mid-list for me, mid-list was always someone who was not probably a New York Times best-selling author, or a best-selling author with a certain number of books sold. And that depended on what that category was and what that was. So it's called a mid-list author. They're often, years ago when people did a lot of catalogs, it would be, you would have your top release, your bestseller, and then you would have other books behind that, and that was considered the mid-list. That's about, it's every publisher defines it probably different.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I would agree.
Oh, I skipped. Is there a place? Is there still a place for Anglo PI? For an Anglo PI?
It depends on if the story's good or not, I guess.
I think there's a place for every book as long as it's a really well-written book. I don't think there's any exclusion
Yeah, I
for
agree.
me.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
When is it appropriate to send a nudge after a submission? That's a good question I always ask.
Well, it's on our website under submissions, but usually 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, it's all right to send a nudge. I sent it in 8 weeks ago. Even 12 weeks later, it's fine.
I think 12 is good.
Well, yeah.
Let's see. I'm not sure I understand this question, but I'll put it out there. The independent publisher doesn't do marketing, but sends books to libraries, bookstores, pitching to TV. What is the difference?
That's kind of feel like it's a reply to something I said, but so some of the larger houses have an in-house publicist or a group of people that all day long are just working on publicizing the titles. We don't have that, but we do it ourselves. But as I said, I have a marketing background, so sort of cobbled together these programs for us to do. And it's a good question because we don't want to just put a book out and be like, okay, here's your book, have a nice day. We've worked on it, we want to sell it. So we're working on with the small budget grassroots sort of marketing ideas. But yeah, I think a larger house will have a dedicated few people. That's all they do all day long. I think all of us are doing multiple jobs all day long to run a business,
Right.
I think that's the difference.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, if you're with the traditional house, depending again what your agent kept for the rights of your book, a traditional publishing house will be out trying to sell the rights to translation, to TV and movie. It depends on what the contract is and who gets to sell that. So that's different. All right.
Last question I have is, what drew you to working with a small press, and what would each of you say is the biggest selling point for working with your press?
Well, I'll go. I started reading when I was a little kid, and at a special early childhood education program in Minnesota. And I realized that I've always loved to read. And so what drew me to working in publishing is that I just understood it. When I went to work in a bookseller, I understood how it worked. And I was trained by some really good people, and I had an unusual experience that is not available anymore because I got to help launch a category that has kept the industry in business. And so I got to work in audio, film, all kinds of the book selling side. I've always loved reading and books. So what drew me to a small press was the one experience that I had not had, but I also started to work in a small press in Seattle. I did not have to go to New York and do it, which is at one time options that I had, but I had a family here and I had a husband who was working. And so I chose to stay on the West Coast. And I essentially did what people are doing now, where I had a home office. And when I left Walden Books, I started my business, and I worked from home, but I also went east all the time. Now it's pretty traditional. People, after COVID, a lot of people left New York and work from home or work wherever they can. And so I stayed in it, and I got to do small press, but I also wanted to learn ebooks. So I started in the small press side of it because they needed to learn. The small press I was working with, which I worked with, was Coffeetown-Camel. They didn't know print that much. They knew ebooks and how to build them and what to look for and how to do it and to work with Amazon and all this. And that was interesting to me as part of someone who believes in reading and literature. So it was like a natural evolving thing for me to work with a small press. And so that's what I enjoy. I enjoy the flexibility of it. But I work a lot. I tell you, we all wear the hats, all different kinds of hats.
Yeah.
Actually, Faith, I'm curious because you're one of the newer people on the scene. So
Yeah, so I've always been an avid reader, come from a family of English teachers and book enthusiasts. So I kind of always knew that I wanted to work in publishing. It's what I studied in college. But, I kind of imagined that, okay, I would have to move to New York to work at one of these large companies, which isn't always appealing. Some of it is, some of it isn't. So when I found the opportunity to work for Oceanview, it was really appealing. And it's been fantastic because I have been able to learn about every single aspect of the book business, which is not something that you necessarily get to do at a much larger company. So I feel very well versed in everything that goes into publishing a book. And I love being so hands-on during the process, getting to know the authors, getting to really work with a book from start to finish. And it's more flexible. I get to work from home, which is nice. I get to stay in Florida. So it's just a really nice place to be.
Cool. Congratulations.
yeah, it's exciting. Like I told you guys how Little Best came about for us anyway. But I also was an avid reader as a kid. I was an English major. My mom's an English teacher, surrounded by books all the time. Every day, I would just go to the library. I grew up in Florida. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. It's super hot. And you can't go to the beach every day. I mean, you can, but some days you just want to go sit in the air conditioning. So I just go to the library. It was really hot out. I just like escape into books. So that's how it sort of started. And I did move to New York for about 10 years after college because I was like, I'm going to go to New York and be a writer. So books writing was always the thing. And then I worked at a lot of bookstores and I managed a large bookstore for a while. And then this opportunity came up and like everything else, I just sort of like, oh, I'll give this a try. It turns into this giant thing. But every single thing that's set up at Level Best is something that we've all the systems in place have something that we've created, learned, taught ourselves. We've formed the business as we went along. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to build. The one selling point for us, the second part of the question, is as a writer myself, I'm a published author before any of this started. I was already being published, and I know what it's like to be on the other side of the table, per se, from the publisher. So I never really wanted it to be like a brick wall in between the two entities. So I thought I want it to be more like a community. I want people to feel supported, and I want people to feel good about what they're doing, be able to contact us with any questions or anything like that. So for me, I think our biggest thing is the sense of supportive community. And our authors have discovered each other on these Zoom things we do, and now they've become friends and gone off and done their own things. So I think the community, I've always been I always want to, organizing large events and things like that, because I like people coming together and being part of something.
Congratulations. Good for you.
Thanks.
Well, that's the last of the questions, but I just want to make a couple of points here. I've included the web links to Epicenter, Oceanview, and Level Best in the chat, along with Epicenter's spring catalog that's a PDF on there for folks. And also, I just entered the independent publishers website too that we talked about earlier. So that's all I have. So I'll turn this back over to Claire.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you guys. I cannot thank you enough for your knowledge and wisdom and being willing to come see us on a Saturday afternoon. We're especially grateful for that, and taking questions and everything. So again, thank you so much. I think everyone here today is walking away with a wealth of new information. And so we appreciate it and appreciate you and your role in the business and your support of authors. So, thank you again. And everybody else, thank you so much for attending today. And hopefully we will see you for our next events in June. So everyone have a wonderful Saturday evening.
And thank you for putting the panel together. It was interesting to hear from different parts of the country about how people do mysteries and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 very honored to be invited and to be on the panel with these two esteemed colleagues. I'm just honored to even be here. So thank you.
Right, right. And one other little note, I think it's really whatever you choose to do and whenever it happens for you, celebrate every step of the way as a writer, because it's an interesting business. And for all of us that work in it, we forget to celebrate, but I want to celebrate the two other women who are here because they have done phenomenal work with the presses. And I know of you, both of you, your presses, and know what kind of work you do. So thank you.
Thank
Well,
you. Same
thanks.
to you.
Thank you.
All three of you, thank you so, so much.
Okay.
All right, everyone, take care.